Welcome to the Detroit Sports Room, your home for Detroit sports news and information. Now, here's Jim.
Yep, and here I am, and I have a special guest today. Who's in the room but Forrester from PFF. I just want to welcome you into the room today. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good, man. I got a little extended vacation the next couple of days, so figured I got the time to take some questions from you and listen and interact with some of the fans out there, hopefully, and talk more about football because I just can't wait for it to come back.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, and like I said, it's really cool that you had the time to do this. I'm glad you're on vacation too. Jeez, I mean, it must be a lot of work though. It really does. I mean, there's so many people to cover and so many players to do and stuff like that. How did you get into all that?
Well, I went to Wayne State, graduated from there and just got the connections and applied to Pro Football Focus. And, before that, I was with Time Incorporated's own sideline report, fan-sided, and just got even more connections through that. So I wanted to take more of an opinion base to more of an analytical, actual statistical approach to the game and learn more about it the best I could. And I also went to the Scouting Academy, which is through the NFL, and learned a lot there. Got other connections that kind of all pointed and led me down this path at PFF. And so far, I've really enjoyed it. It's a lot of work, but I'm getting a lot more than just pay out of it. I'm getting a lot of knowledge and experience that I wouldn't have gotten elsewhere.
So, the casual fan, right? I know there's a lot of them that know a lot about football. Okay. So,
Right.
We have former coaches that have been on and all this other stuff, but it's different when you dive into the analytics of things, without giving away like trade secrets or whatever. How do you do what you do?
Well, I mean, there's really no secret to it. I mean, you watch film and you record what it is that you're assigned. And ultimately, there's a lot of things that go on in a football game beyond just the actual stat of it, of like receiving yards or sacks or whatever. There's more in-depth looks that you can have in each part of the game and each aspect of it. And there's multiple dimensions of it as well. So you can break down what kind of throw a quarterback's making. You can break down what kind of pressure someone's getting. You can break down all sorts of things. And it's those finer tuned things that you can pull out of film that can help you stop someone or help you be more unstoppable, essentially. So there's a lot that the teams look at. And I mean, this is obviously for the fans' benefit to know these things, and whether it's for sports betting or whether it's just for their own knowledge. But I mean, the teams can ultimately benefit from a lot of these advanced stats, because then they can know who they have to prepare for in certain situations, because football is situational and it's not just vanilla by any means. So, there's a lot for the game that PFF does beyond just the grading of players. I think the advanced stats and metrics is what really sets them apart. And, next gen stats, they're coming after them too. There's, a lot of, companies trying to get in on the analytics game for sure.
That makes sense. And it's very useful for people and players and everything else, and coaches to be able to scheme for games and scheme up game plans and stuff for different individuals and how their tendencies are, what they do, things like that. So are you assigned just the Lions players or like players in general?
I'll just get any games, and I've done mostly college football, a lot of smaller teams. I just started, last year. So I did get some premier teams and games. By all means, it doesn't really matter. I'm looking more so from the data perspective, and whatever game I'm assigned, that's what I do. So for me, my affiliation with the Lions, with the sideline report, was as far as the extent was when it came to any connections with any team. Right now, I'm just a guy that collects data regardless of what team. So that's the case.
That answered my question about it. Are you a fan of the Lions at heart, or are you just giving up the fandom kind of thing?
Oh no, I mean I'm all in with this team, and
Oh, okay.
I think it all started, just being in the suite with Charlie Sanders. He was a family friend of mine,
Oh,
and
wow.
my mom and his daughter Mary Jo, the boxer, professional boxer, badass. She trained with my mom, and been around her in the boxing gym, so that's cool. So I got that relationship with Charlie Sanders before I even knew and grew up appreciating him as a football player, and it just blossomed from there. And I think high school, when I really started loving football, playing a lot and being good at it and enjoying it, that's when I really started being more of a Lions fan for sure.
Yeah, I mean that I've heard a lot of Barry Sanders. I've even heard other players and stuff like that. Charlie
Yeah.
Sanders, a tight end. I hadn't heard that. He's a tight end, correct? That's what I thought. I'm pretty
He
sure.
was, yep.
And I actually that's the first one I've heard. I mean, I've done a few of these now, and that's the first one that I've heard Charlie Sanders. But a legend in Detroit, absolute legend.
Yeah, I was a little bit not upset, but it kind of made me feel a little uneasy when they gave number 88 to TJ Hawkinson. Not because I
Yeah.
don't think he could fill Charlie Sanders' shoes, because he won't. He will never do that. Maybe as a player, he can exceed the stats, especially because it's different eras. And, I have a lot of respect for TJ Hawkinson. He's got a lot to prove, especially being a higher pick than most tight ends. But, Charlie was the longest tenured Lion not named a Ford. He was a
Mhm.
player, a coach, and he was in
Yep.
the front office.
Yep.
And how the guy didn't even have that number 88 retired, I have no idea. So I just hope that, TJ honors him by having a good career on the field. And you never know where TJ can end up. Maybe he's a Lioner for life, or however it works out. But Charlie Sanders was one of a kind, and he was revolutionary for his time. Bad to
I
the bone
totally agree
player,
with you.
bad to the bone guy. So it's sad that he passed a couple years ago. I was at his
Mhm.
funeral, and there was a lot of stardom there, a lot of really cool players. But at the end of the day, it was pretty sad to see him go. But that's where I really began to love the Lions, was because of Charlie. He's a good guy. I like him a lot. Miss him.
I'm in agreement with you and the fact that 88 should have been retired. I don't think anybody else should have his number. I don't.
No.
Poor kid. I'm sorry, but I don't know if he
Yeah.
requested that number or what happened there.
I doubt it. But I mean, he
I,
wore number 38, I think, in college. So I mean, for a tight end, what are you going to be? You're going to be 48, or are you going to be 88?
yeah,
So I guess at the end of the day, it could have been something else. Who knows? But I agree with you. It should have been retired, because there was no
it's a
one.
lot of
No one
pressure,
else like. Yeah, it is.
and he don't need the pressure to be honest. I mean,
No, he doesn't.
tight
He just needs to
ends
go out there and ball, and I
he
think he
does
will.
because the tight end position is difficult to learn.
Yeah.
Because he blocks too. He's a good
Yep.
blocker. He's a good, and he's good going out for a pass, a wide receiving tight end. But in a way, it's funny because I think he's got a lot of pressure on him because of Eric Ebron, because of the number he has, because of people expected more. People are going to expect more because he's number 8 overall.
Yep.
You can't take a tight end 8 overall and them not be like all world or something.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go out there and be great in every aspect of the game. And quite honestly, not enough of them are taken that high. It just doesn't happen. Doesn't mean that it can't. And, I expect him to really be better this year. I thought that there were, they weren't the easiest catches, but I thought there were some targets that, he should have come down with.
Yeah,
and that was one of the things that he was more sure. He was a more sure receiver coming out of college, but I guess it's different in the NFL for sure. It's a little bit more difficult, but he should have had a few more catches. Could have had a touchdown, I think, in one of the games. I can't remember which one it was, but there's more left to be desired. That's for sure. But I think, he's been training. He put on some good size. He needed that. he needed to fill his frame a little bit more, and working out with George Kittle, those two are buddies from Iowa. I think he's going to be primed for a good breakout year number 2.
I hope so. I really do, because I feel bad for the kid, with all the stuff that's going, him being picked that high and all that stuff and the pressure that kid must be under. It's a lot. It's a lot. You said that you did a lot of college work and stuff. Did you do any work on TJ Hawkinson, or do you do some of this on the side or anything like that, just for your own personal knowledge and stuff?
There's a lot of things that I just like watching film and football in general, and I'll just pick up on, not even necessarily advanced stats, but, when I'm doing it on my own, I'll pick up on tendencies of what players would be good at certain situations. So not necessarily recording the amount of data, but this data that, this guy's good, on the hitch routes against the zone coverage, and then just getting the situational football perspectives from certain players and what they're good and not good at is something that I look at a lot.
Can you explain a little bit more? Now you gather the information. Now, are you responsible for grading players or no?
Now, Pro Football Focus has a lot of different roles. Okay. I'm not in the player grading role. That's something that eventually I could do, or there's all sorts of things you can mix around and do, but I'm liking what I'm doing now. And I think the player grading is probably the most gray area, I think, because a lot of it can be subjective. There's nothing subjective about the stats that you record, because that's situational football. That's what happens. But sometimes when you're looking at the actual situation on film and you're trying to grade and assess a player, how do we know in certain situations whether he was responsible for this assignment or that assignment? So it can be a little bit hairy when it comes to evaluating the grading of players, because you don't know exactly what those responsibilities were between those players.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. That's something that people need to know. I just wanted to get a little bit into it so people know how this is done, and get a little bit of a respect for what you guys do, because it's hours and hours of film, and it's got to be. Yeah, it's got to be a little bit tedious, but it's got to be a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. And I don't think people realize how much goes into those grades.
Yeah, and there's a time crunch too. When these games need to get done, needs to be done live. So by the time that game's over, everything needs to be submitted.
Wow.
Yeah, our guys are pretty lenient too, like they understand. But the standard is to get done, by the end of the game, and that's a lot to ask of us, but most of the time we can do that, and they're pretty good about accommodating us. They really are. So it's a great company with good flexibility, and you put in your own work and put in your own time, and you get out of it what you put in.
That's cool. I mean, it's just such a cool thing to be able to really dive deep into the game and learn more about the game as you're doing it, and learn more about players that you like and players that, I mean, you have to be subjective, but still, I mean, it must be a blast doing it, man.
Yeah. And it's easy to, get a good idea of who's responsible for certain plays or who isn't. Other times it's hard. So that grading aspect could definitely be difficult, to say the least.
Yeah, it seems like it would be. Let's go into a little bit more Lions stuff. I know people out here want to hear about our team and what you think about them. First thing I'm going to ask you, as the team stands as it is right now, what do you think? I mean, I've heard everything from 12-4 to 4-12 and all this stuff. I'm not saying make a prediction, but what kind of team is this? What can we expect when they take the field? Or is it just a huge unknown like everybody kind of thinks?
I mean, right now they're a 7-9 football team in my eyes, but I think as we progress through the season, I said 11-5, 12-4. That's where I'm at. That's where I think they can be, based on some of the decisions they've made with the coaching, and that's with high hopes that the actual system defensively prevails, because it's
That's
the
the
offense that's
max.
hitting
Yeah.
on full cylinders. But I'm still kind of on the fence about Patricia. He's not really getting the job done. But then again, there were some circumstances that arose from not being the healthiest. But you know what? You got to have depth. You got to have guys that can step in and do well, because it's the system that prevails. Ultimately, you can't rely on the talent around you. You got to rely on a good system. And so far, his system hasn't been the greatest, so he's got to improve it. And I think, maybe a couple more things have to get done before I can say, 11-5 for sure. But that's where I think they'll end up being at the end of the season.
Really? You think they're going to be 11-5? Wow.
11-5, 12-4. Yep, right around that range. I think
Wow.
they're that capable, just because of how they are on offense. Stafford's a great leader, and
But you had
obviously
said
him
that,
having to stay healthy is a big question mark too. So
that's true too. But you said they're a 7-9 team now. How do they progress, and how does that translate into a 12-4, 11-5 team?
I think, just the defensive system actually starting to click and performing well. I haven't seen it yet, but my expectation is it will be there, but it is going to be an adjustment for some of these guys, and they are getting some new guys in there that, although have been familiar with the system, some other guys, are brand new to the system, and some guys were just drafted. So there will be some transitional periods, and I think with Corey Unland joining the fold as a defensive coordinator, there's going to be a dynamic that has to get worked out. Who's going to necessarily call the plays or not, I don't know. Probably needs to be Patricia, honestly, in my opinion. But philosophically, they say they agree with each other, so that's cool. But they do need to get more exotic. They got to incorporate different fronts. I don't think they have to play a 3-3-5 defense 99% of the time, or whatever it was. We got to get a little bit more creative with certain things. And my hope is that they will do that, but because I haven't seen that yet, and if I'm anticipating them being the same, they're around a 7-9 football team. But I think they're going to get better, and I think they're going to put more on these guys' plates and make them an 11-5, 12-4 football team. I think they're capable of that.
I hope so. I mean, I think that defensively, I think one position, more than a lot of other teams, the one position relies on the other position group a whole lot more. At least I see that. I don't think our linebackers were very good last year. I love the addition of Jamie Collins. Austin Bryant should be coming back. He plays more of an end, jack type of position. Deshaun Hand was a huge, huge piece last year that was missing. I think he's a pretty darn good D-end rusher even. He could be interior defensive tackle rusher, because he didn't do a great deal of pass rush in college, but yet, man, 4th round pick. I think he was one of the best ranked rookies as a rookie defensive tackle. So, I mean, he's good. They bring in Danny Shelton for that plugger position. They bring in Deron Harmon to take off the top. And that allows Tracy Walker to come down and be more of a free safety, strong safety, whereas Deron Harmon would be the free safety. I had that backwards. I'm sorry.
No,
I don't mind the defense, but it's that nose position basically that bothers me, because I don't see the depth. You got first guys. Yeah, that first team is pretty good, but you got some injuries, and all of a sudden it looks pretty bad to me. Am I right?
Yeah.
Am I seeing the right things here?
You're talking about the defensive tackle position?
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm I think it's a more underrated position as far as, not having quite the stardom up front. Yeah, you've got some decent pieces, but I actually think Kevin Strong is a guy to watch out for. And it wasn't, it was unfortunate it happened, but, his last game, I think it was against the Vikings before he went on IR. He was one of the higher graded players in that game. He was disruptive. He was making plays against the run, and he was more of a very heavy base defensive end in a 4-3. And transitioned to a defensive tackle because he was like in the 285 range. Now I think he's closer to, 300. So he's more acclimated to playing D tackle. I think if he stays healthy, he's got a hell of a chance to be productive on this football team. And then Jayshon Cornell out of Ohio State,
Ooh, yeah, I like him.
7th round pick. He's a very sneaky good player. And, he was a guy that didn't get a whole lot of playing time just because of, how they were using him. Initially he was a D tackle, and then they needed him to play more of an edge role. And then he played a lot of 3-4 defensive end as well. So he was that hybrid starter finally in his 5th year. And I think he's going to be a hybrid player with us. I think he's got some interesting skill sets. And then, John Penasini, I think reminds me a lot of John Atkins. I think he needs like another year or two before he really breaks the mold, because he's more of just a run stuffer. That's really all he is. But then ultimately, I don't see it being anyone else. Could they use Mike Daniels? Sure, but we'll see.
What about Nick Williams? What do you think about him?
He's definitely a good player. He's definitely someone that reminds me a lot of Deshaun Hand. Very unique skill sets. And by the way, I think I noticed Mike Daniels is supposed to be going to the Bengals. So,
oh, okay. Breaking news.
Yeah, something I saw on Twitter. So we're probably not going to be getting him. But, I could see where we might need to add somebody, but I think based on how the Patriots work and how I think Matt Patricia will work, I think he'll actually add, his young guys to the group and expect them to step up. But Nick Williams reminds me a lot of Deshaun Hand.
Wow.
I think he's a good player. Yep.
That's pretty high praise.
He can play nose tackle. He can play 3-4 D end. He can play out on the edge. He's a unique player. It's just, he finally shows up at age 30. He's an older guy, but nonetheless, he's someone that can hopefully help this football team being versatile and being a pass rusher. They need, if they can get interior pressure, the edge pressure is not as much of a priority. You need that pressure to come from inside and out more so than outside in. So I think he's one of those guys that's going to be a huge help. And I think Danny Shelton's more of a situational player. I really do think Deshaun Hand and Nick Williams will probably start. That's just my assumption.
Okay. I'm more sold on Danny Shelton as the big nose that in the middle, like a Vince Wilfork type. That's just my opinion. I don't know. We'll see what they do. You know what I mean? So what position group do you think is the weakest on the Lions right now?
Edge rushers, 100%. Well, I mean, you've got Romeo Okwara on the non-football injury list. You've got Austin Bryant on the PUP list. So, I mean, you don't have too many guys healthy. The true edge players that we have other than Julian Okwara would be Trey Flowers, right? And honestly, Trey Flowers to me isn't really a true edge rusher. I think he's a good base defensive end, holds up well in the run game, but he's much better kicking inside as an interior rusher. He's not a sack artist by any means. Not saying that doesn't warrant him of being crowned a good player. I think he's a good player, but he's not, an Everson Griffin or Jadeveon Clowney, two guys that would absolutely help our team out right now and put us in a lot better shape. And it would allow Trey Flowers to play more of a base defensive end role opposite, another player like Griffin or Clowney, who is traditionally better against left tackles, and then someone who's better against right tackles and can hold up in the run game like Trey Flowers can play his more natural position. So
that sounds good.
Edge rusher, we really need some help, big time.
Okay. My view, let me ask you this. Let me ask you a little bit about the offensive line. What do you see there? Because that's my biggest concern going in.
I think the biggest thing that I really liked in the offseason was Jeff Davidson stepping down from his role as offensive line coach and Hank Fraley taking over. Very respected player during his time with the Philadelphia Eagles and very much a player's coach. good all-around guy. I think he's going to bring the most out of those guys. I think he's going to get things straightened out, because ultimately, when it comes down to football, it's about the systems. And I think he's got a good system potentially in place for these guys. And I like the depth they added. Tackle's not the deepest depth, but I think they've got a good three group there, big three, and then interior. I think they're really sound. They've got some good guys in the interior. I'm very much looking forward to the offensive line performing. I think they'll exceed a lot of people's expectations.
Wow, that's really good news. I hate to say that's really good news. What do you think about the two rookies, Stenberg and Jonah Jackson?
I think Stenberg's going to take some time to adjust, because I know he had a ton of penalties, and a lot of that was over-aggression, but a lot of that was just not great technique and not being quite as athletic as some of the other guys. But he did not allow a sack. So to his credit, that was good, but at the same rate had a ton of penalties, like almost double digits worth of penalties. I don't know how many were holding or what, but take it with a grain of salt by all means. But he's a nasty run blocker, nasty demeanor. That's something you can't coach. That's a mentality, and that's something that I really like about him. And then Jonah Jackson, I think initially will be coming off the bench, but I think he could crack his way into a starting role. I think he's going to be the main backup to Ode Abuji. I think he'll win the right guard spot. That's my prediction anyway. Yeah.
I had Joe Dahl and at left. I had Jonah Jackson winning that at right, but he might be too experienced. You might be right about that.
He might be right. He might be. But I don't know how, with not much of a training camp, and
we still got Kenny Wiggins too.
Yep, and Kenny Wiggins. He was actually signed almost about a month later after Ode Abuji. And remember, Ode Abuji has some familiarity with Bevel. The familiarity was with Jeff Davidson for Kenny Wiggins. And now that he's gone, he's kind of just a guy in there to potentially, provide some competition. But I think Ode Abuji's the better player and is familiar with the system as well. And so that's where I think he gets the edge. Mm-hmm. But then ultimately, if Jonah Jackson can work on his running game blocking, that's something he's got to work on a little bit. I think he'll ultimately crack the starting lineup.
That's cool. I was going to ask you this before, but I'll ask it now. What do you think? Your thoughts on Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn?
Matt Patricia is one of those guys that obviously comes from a good group, comes from a solid franchise, but, a lot of the things that helped that franchise do well were not necessarily in his control, like Bill Belichick. He's the true mastermind behind that defense. He had a great offensive coordinator and Josh McDaniels and a good quarterback, spearheading that offense. So hopefully, he can just take a little bit from Belichick, and then everyone else step up and do their roles, like Bevel being a good play caller, and Combs is a good special teams coach.
Yeah, I like
and him. Corey Unlin, he's stepping up for the first time in his role as a D coordinator. But I think for Patricia, I think he's learned to be more of a player's coach. He's kind of a hard ass when he first got here, and he didn't need to be that way. And I think he learned from that, and ultimately he's just learned to be a coach. He's young, so I think it's going to improve.
Sounds good. I was thinking about this when we were talking about some of the free agents we brought in. What do you think about this season's free agent class, and profile any player that you think that maybe is a little bit under the radar or something like that? Whatever, just what you think about this class that we brought in this year.
Well, quite a few of them were former Patriots players, so that's obviously good from a standpoint that they can come in, get plugged into the system, and know what to do. But a guy that I really liked and actually was kind of calling for and ended up signing with us was J-Ron Kurtz. He's a very good player when it comes to being in the box, lining up against tight ends. He's a good nickel defender, like that dollar safety. He's 6'4", nearly 230 pounds, like Cam Chancellor size. I don't think quite not quite as athletic, but J-Ron Curse can be a force in this defense. He's got a 3-game suspension, though, and the coaches knew that. So despite knowing that he's going to have a 3-game suspension, I think that says a lot about how they feel about him and what he can provide for this defense. You watch out for him because I think he'll contribute quite a bit.
Wow, that's good. I mean, 6'4" guy that can cover tight ends. That's something we need. I think Jamie Collins is going to be covering a lot of people too, though. He's really good at that. He's athletic and he offers some pass rush too.
Oh yeah, he offers a little bit of everything. So the more you can move guys around, the harder it is for like the offense to know exactly what to do. So if you mix guys up and you get them in different roles, that's where versatility really shines through, because when you don't know what a guy's going to do on a particular down, then you're the one in control and it's not the offense controlling you.
So then we added that, and then we added through the draft too this year. It was an interesting draft for me, getting Swift, getting, the 2 offensive linemen that we've already talked about. Give me kind of a rundown of what you think of the players in the draft, or some highlights of players that you like, and what do you think of our draft this year?
I thought it was, a solid B, close to a B plus. I'd say like an 85%, just on the cusp. Just because there were a couple moves, like I didn't think we needed to get Stenberg. Myself, I thought we could have probably gone with, maybe another pass rusher, double down on there, maybe try and add another backup quarterback to compete with Chase Daniel. But ultimately, I came away impressed. There wasn't one bad pick really in my mind. But I thought that my favorite pick for sure was Jason Huntley, and a guy that I talked about pre-draft. I really wanted him, and he ended up being on our team. So I was super pumped about that. Predicted him to be like a 4th or 5th round pick, and that's exactly what he was a 5th round pick. Basically a Theo Riddick on nitrous, Tyreek Hill in the version of a running back minus the off the field issues. And he's one of those guys that's just an absolute blazer on the field, best pass catching back in this class, and he had a higher broken tackle rating than Clyde Edwards-Helaire of LSU. So to me, I think he's a dark horse to potentially lead the team in total yards from scrimmage, accounting for kick returns, accounting for receiving yards, accounting for rushing. He has a chance to really break into this running back committee and assert himself with a huge role that Stafford hasn't had in a couple of years.
Yeah, he really liked Theo Riddick, especially on 3rd downs. But that was kind of the trap with Theo Riddick, was everybody knew what he was going to do, but he still did it. I mean, that's why he was so good.
Yep, and what's going to make Jason Huntley so much better is the guy can run between the tackles, so you're not going to know. Plus, he hits the hole with authority, and he's gone. Theo Riddick is, a little bit of the Dancing with the Stars kind of guy, moving around, not quite assertive, hitting the hole, and he's not that fast either.
Right.
Huntley will make you pay. Yeah, he was quick. Oh, yeah.
But
he was very quick.
I watched some of his stuff, man. Holy cow.
Yep.
That dude can fly. And you think he's going to have a bigger role? Do you think he's going to be on some of them gimmick plays, like they toss to a wide receiver if he lines up in the slot, those type of things?
I think he could very well function in that way because he lined up in the slot quite a bit. He's like kind of like J.D. McKissick in the sense that,
much better,
and be able to play a couple different roles. And I remember being kind of upset about the J.D. McKissick move. I'm like, this guy's not all that great. And I thought they should have used him more last year. I was pleasantly surprised by him. It was mostly like a health thing. Like I wasn't sure he's going to be healthy, but he stayed fairly healthy. And unfortunately, we didn't use him enough. But I think Jason Huntley is going to be one of these guys that's really intriguing. And anytime he touches the ball can be a big play, big problem waiting to happen.
That's great. We need somebody that's like that. I remember Javid Best, and I think that was one of the best running backs we've had since Barry Sanders. We had Reggie Bush for a minute, but Javid Best was the one we drafted. He had a lot of potential, and if it wasn't for injuries, I think that guy would have been special. But if he's anywhere near that, that would be great.
Yep.
What do you think about DeAndre Swift?
Go ahead and repeat that question.
Oh, you're fine. We can edit that out. We're not live.
Okay. Oh, we're not?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Perfect.
You're
Then what I'm
golden,
going to
dude.
do, okay, perfect. I'm going to close the door real quick.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yep. All right. Go ahead and re-ask that question. 3, 2, 1.
What do you think about DeAndre Swift?
I mean, I like him. He's one of those players that has really good quickness, really good vision, and has those Barry Sanders-esque moves to where it's just instincts, and he's just making these quick moves, making another quick move, has good hands, nothing too spectacular, but good enough to get the job done, willing as a blocker. He's a good every down back, just maybe not a workhorse. Same thing with Kerryon Johnson. I think they both have some of the same skill sets, but I think they need to kind of piggyback off of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And same can be said for Bo Scarborough. And they all kind of need to have a little bit of a timeshare going on. But DeAndre Swift is a very hard guy to tackle, and he's got some good bursts too. So he's not quite a speed demon, but by all means, he can hit some pretty good home run balls for sure.
Is Ty Johnson the odd man out here, or what do you see for him? I mean, we have Huntley, we have him, we have we just have a lot of players at the running back position, and for kick return and punt return, we have a lot of people in those positions. So where does he fit?
I think Ty Johnson fits in with this football team. Probably not going to be too active, this year, but I think he does have a place on this team. He's a good kick returner. But ultimately, he does have the second best home run hit ability on this football team. He's a very fast individual, and he's, pretty close in speed, not quite as fast as Jason Huntley, and yet, he's, pushing 220 pounds. So
yeah, I think
Ty
it's explosion.
Johnson,
yeah, I think it's explosion with Huntley.
Yep, it is explosion, but I mean, the guy, he separates from people. He was running in the 4.3s.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not saying that. I think the difference between him and Ty Johnson is that explosive burst initially, because when I watched him last year, he didn't look fast to me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
He had all this speed and all this stuff, but when he was running the ball, he just didn't seem to use it or get in the open field enough to use it.
Yeah, his explosiveness is not really there. He's not real jittery. Yeah. But he does have a nice top gear that when he gets around the corner, he'll just pick up some speed. Yeah. He had a nice run against the Packers. I really like that, kind of displayed what he can do, but he's also, going to be falling forward. He breaks tackles pretty well. Very physical runner. So I actually do think there is a place for him. I think the place that kind of gets fallen out of favor a little bit is the fullback position. Just because I like Nick Bawden, but he just hasn't proven he can stay healthy. And I think someone like Isaac Nada, who's a third, fourth tight end kind of guy, can stick on the roster, do his role as a tight end, but also as a fullback. And then someone like Jason Kabinda, who filled in a little bit at fullback. I think he could fill in there. Plus, he's a linebacker, and he can play special teams coverage pretty well. So those guys provide a little bit more assets, provide more assets to the team, essentially, versus someone like Nick Bawden, who's okay on special teams. And, he is a dog when it comes to being a fullback. He is a really good fullback, but unfortunately, how good has he been in the NFL? He's been okay, but he's been battling injuries. So I think there's a possibility that you have Ty Johnson, you have Kerryon Johnson, you'll have DeAndre Swift, you have Bo Scarborough, and then you'll have Jason Huntley. So you'll have 5 running backs in the stable, and hopefully get the running game going. I think
that is a huge focus this year. You can see it. The linemen they took, the 2 running backs they took. They've been trying to build this running game for a long time. It really looks like this could be something special. It really does. Yep. What do you think about them as a group, rather than individuals? Because we kind of went through them individually. But what do you think about them as a group? Do you think that, this is the year that we finally get a running game?
Yes. I think there's going to be tremendous improvement. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on getting that run game going. I think part of it starts with who they have in the stable, and I think they're going to use all those guys. And I think when you look at the history of guys like Kerryon Johnson, Bo Scarborough, and now DeAndre Swift, all those guys have had some form of injury history.
Yep.
Nothing too severe for some, others more. But I think they expect to ride all those guys, not necessarily into the ground, but be able to use them.
Yeah,
And I think the
utilize them to
numbers
give them a
game that's
little
going to
bit-
help them. Yeah.
to give them a little bit of a rest. You know
Yep,
what I'm
give
saying?
them
So
some
it's like
longevity.
you're
Yep.
splitting carries.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. So this whole team, man, I want that 12-4. You give me hope, and that's not a good thing for a Lions fan. No, I'm just kidding.
Not all the time, no, because there's a lot of things that have to happen before we can, be looking at that. But that's where my hope and my faith is. And I mean, based on the systems, if they prevail, they have good enough talent to make this team good. I mean, I'd like to see them add a really good edge rusher. That would really turn the corner for me. I'd really like that.
Me too. The other thing is, you said, we were talking earlier, and you said that you pretty much had your 53, right? And you explained how the 55 to 53 man roster worked. Number one, could you explain that for everybody? And then number two, what are some surprise cuts that you have on your list that we may not be thinking is going to get cut?
Well, I'm not as definitive on the exact rules of it. And by all means,
fine.
So I can tell you that this is how my understanding of it anyway. And from what I have been reading up on, you can have on game day up to 55 guys on your roster, meaning you can promote 2 guys from your practice squad because they increase the number of players on the practice squad. And I can't remember if it's 2 to 3 times a year that you can do that, but there's a certain amount of games that you can elevate those 2 players to make it a 55-man roster. But essentially, you only have so many active on game day. So it's important to understand that it's not like 55 men out the gate. It's 53 man with the chance that you can have 2 guys elevated off the practice squad a couple times during the season.
A couple times during the year. That's interesting to me. Yeah, that's what I was saying. So what do you think about the 53? Do you think about some surprise cuts, or who do you have sticking with us that maybe we didn't think would, or that type of thing?
Yeah, as of right now, I think based on some of the guys that I have making it, I think it's all pretty straightforward. I don't think there's any huge surprises. I guess people might be surprised. I don't think Nick Bawden's going to be on the roster. That might be a surprise to some. Quite a few people that I thought were on the roster bubble either, aren't playing or they've been cut already.
Right.
So I think maybe, if we add another premier pass rusher, I think someone like Miles Killebrew might be a surprise cut.
Okay.
Just for the simple fact that, he's a great special teamer. I get it, but he's not being utilized that much like he was early on his career. So I think we've already seen enough from him as a player, and I think there's other players that would fill his role better. I think Jason Kabinda probably would push him off the roster at that point, especially because he could fill in, play some fullback. He's a good linebacker as well if you need him in there as a pinch. So that's if we add another edge rusher. If we didn't add anybody, his role is safe, but by all means, I think he's someone that's going to have to earn his role on this team more than just special teams.
Okay, cool. I was going to talk about one more player is oh my gosh, it just blew it, man. I'll have to edit this part out.
Yeah.
And if you want
I don't think Kenny Wiggins will make the roster. I know a lot of people, a couple of Lions Wire people have mentioned him being a starter, and the guy is not good. I don't even have him making the roster. Kenny Wiggins not making it. I mean, that's just how I feel about it. That's why I talk up Ode Abushi a little bit. I think he's the better player, not by much, but Kenny Wiggins, a guy that was a starter for this team last year and had some meaningful snaps, I don't think he'll make it. So that's just, other than that, I mean, I think it's almost straightforward who's going to make it.
I don't like Kenny Wiggins either. I'm not sure why they brought him back. Maybe it's just familiarity, and that's something that they really wanted as a backup or a person that could, take some snaps. And I don't know what they wanted, but I don't see a whole lot in Kenny Wiggins.
Yep, they're pushing everybody. Even Joe Dahl, who I'm pretty high on myself.
Yeah,
and I hope that he continues to progress, and I hope that he keeps that starting job because he's been someone I really like. He just hasn't been the healthiest. I don't think he's played a full 16-game season yet. So I think he missed 3 games towards the end of the year, yeah.
So this might be a lightning rod question, but what do you think of Jared Davis? A lot of people around the league love him. Detroit fans seem to not so much love him.
Well, I think what they see is that flash in the pan. He's super explosive, really speedy. But for some reason, the guy, I don't know if he doesn't have like grip in his hands or if his arms don't work properly. I don't know what it is, but like that brain to muscle, in his hands connection just doesn't happen. Like he can't tackle, and I don't understand it. It drives me absolutely nuts. Drives me up a wall, quite honestly. It's sad because we invested in him so high, and he's supposed to be, it's not that he's supposed to be. Yeah, it's not that he's supposed to be a great tackler, because guess what? He wasn't. I thought it was not the greatest first round pick at all. I thought he was more of like a 3rd or 4th round pick because it's like based on ability, but he has to improve skill set wise. But he didn't pack on the pounds for nothing. And we know his best role is getting after the quarterback, not being put in a place where he's making decisions and having to see the field.
Exactly.
He just doesn't, because there'll be plays where he's covering the guy perfectly and all of a sudden he'll stop and let him go. And it's like, his brain, it does not function that well to where he needs to be in those situations. He just needs to be attacking. And I'm not saying that he's going to be the next James Harrison, but based on body type, 6 foot, 240. And now you have Jared Davis, who's 6'1", 245. He has that dog in him. He wants to go out there and crush people. He wants to go out there and be good for his team. And early on in James Harrison's career, he was not doing the things Jared Davis has done so far. Like Jared Davis is ahead of him so far in his career. And I'm not saying he's going to ascend higher than that, but he needs to be a pass rushing linebacker, plain and simple. And there needs to be some usage and coverage for sure. Like with Jamie Collins, in the same respect, you got to use some versatility, get these guys in different situations, but minimize those situations specifically because he just can't make the best decisions. But he did say he's better mentally now than he ever has been before. So that's really where he needs to get it, because physically he can hang with the guys. He's got the skill set to be in coverage. Now it's just mentally putting the mental aspect into the physical aspect and making those quick decisions and having those instincts to make those plays. But he's not much of an instinctual guy. He's more of an attacking guy. That's what he needs to do in order to have success with this team. And I think when you're putting on, close to 10 pounds or however much weight he put on to be 245 pounds, the guy's going to be banging close to the line of scrimmage trying to get after the quarterback most of the time.
I hope so. I mean, I think that's his role. He reminds me of one of these, and I'm old, so you may not know the reference, but there used to be these little robots that you just wind them up and let them go straight. They wouldn't go anywhere else. They'd just go in a straight line. And if you could put him in a straight line to the quarterback, he'll get there. If he's got to make a sidestep, it's going to be a difficult proposition for him.
He does not break down well.
No, he doesn't.
No, and that was like football fundamentals 101. Break down. And then our coach would say, down up. You do a down up and then off you go. But, breaking down, it's like the simplest parts of any football level he just does not have. It's like, how are you not there? So hopefully mentally, because he's hard to watch from a mental aspect. So
yeah, it's true. It really is.
But he
Okay,
could have
so
double-digit sacks potentially. We'll see.
he could. He could.
Yep.
And if that
Yep.
quarterback stands still, he has a chance. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, just one little sidestep,
He
and
just moves
you
one
see him
way.
go out.
I
He
see.
goes out the picture. You see that? Just like that.
I
Out of
see the
screen.
quarterback with the little red thing for the bull. Just let
Oh
him go
my
by.
gosh.
Sorry, that's terrible, but it was funny.
It's fantastic.
So, okay, so I got something else. I'm sorry. I keep thinking of things as I go. Jeff Okudah. For me, I wanted Isaiah Simmons. That was just my personal preference because he does so much for the defense. But we've addressed a lot of that situational defensive things with multiple players, I think. But I really wanted Isaiah Simmons. First of all, do you think it was the right pick at number 3 with Okudah? And what do you think about Okudah?
Well, I think Okudah is a good football player, but I would have gone with Isaiah Simmons as well. He's just an athletic specimen. He's just really impressive. And I think Okudah is going to be a good player by all means, but I wasn't terribly thrilled about it. But again, he's still going to be a good player. I know that. And he's a great fundamentals guy. He's got good hip fluidity, and a lot of the best corners in this league aren't that fast. And you got to think about it. When you're a defender, you've got some advantage when you're off the ball a little bit. And if you have good hip mirroring skills, you can overcome a lot of those speed deficiencies.
Let's hope so.
Yep.
Getting a corner at 3, Deion Sanders was picked 5th. So just saying.
Yeah, he's not Deion Sanders. No.
I'm just saying.
No. And the thing is, there's no Isaiah Simmons. Like, he could play nickel corner. He could play safety, free or strong. He could play inside linebacker. He could play outside linebacker, like a jack of all trades. And how that didn't appeal to the Lions, I don't know.
They love versatility. I can't understand it at all.
Right. And Okudah's only a 1-year starter. It's not like he's a super proven commodity at his position. He had a good year, but there were a lot of times where Damon Arnett was locked up on some of the better receivers. So
I agree.
Yeah, we'll see how things turn out with Okudah.
Yeah, I know. That's us as Lions fans, though. We want this one guy, and then all of a sudden they get another guy, and you're like, God, I really wanted the other guy, but let's. And then we start loving this other guy that they got because we have to.
But luckily, Isaiah Simmons went to probably my second favorite team, just because I got a lot of family out in Arizona. But
cool.
I think he's going to do some good things for the football team. Arizona is going to be damn good. They could even push for a division title. They're that good.
I don't disagree with you. I think Arizona, people say Arizona and they kind of go, whatever, but I think they're going to be a good team. I really do.
Yep. And when you got a guy like Kyler Murray at the helm, he's every bit as good as some of the other quarterbacks. He's close to top 10. I think after this year, he might prove it, especially with adding DeAndre Hopkins.
I don't understand that move. That's got to be one of the dumbest trades in history. At least I think so. Maybe I'm missing something. But
I mean, when you look at what Jamal Adams, what the Jamal Adams trade netted the Jets versus what the Houston Texans netted from their trade of Nuke, it was not even close to good value at all.
No,
Cardinals got him for a steal. Quite
it's
honestly,
almost like they just said, bye, here you go. Maybe
yeah.
We don't need them. Wow. But this has been a great show. I really appreciate you doing this, and I appreciate your time. So everybody out there, where can they find you and what you do?
Oh, you won't be finding me, man. A lot of the work we do is in the shadows. So if you can find my Twitter handle, though, at FSOLMEN12, FSolman12. So you can find some of my opinions on there and stuff that I post, and hopefully you guys can comment back and give me some good advice.
It sounds amazing. I've had a really good time talking to you. It's been a blast, to be honest. This has been a fun show. Everybody, if you could click the like button and hit the subscribe thing and then click the bell or whatever you got to do. I know it's exhausting. So take 5 minutes and, get a break because you've earned it. Anyway, that's who's in the room for this weekend. We really appreciate you being here. I appreciate Forrester for being here with us. And with that, as usual,